Chapter 1. Arrival. Shota arrived in America with 2 suitcases and a heart filled with uncertainty. The moment he stepped out of the airport, a cold winter breeze brushed against his face. New York City, vast, loud, and dazzling, felt like another planet compared to the quiet life he had known in Japan. But he struggled with English from the very first day. Simple conversations felt like climbing a steep hill. Ordering food, asking for directions, even hearing his own voice in a foreign language made his chest tighten with anxiety. But every night, alone in his small apartment, Shota whispered to himself, "I will not give up. That I came here for a reason." To support his studies and living expenses, Shota found a part-time job at a small neighborhood cafe. The cafe was warm, filled with the scent of roasted coffee beans and the soft chatter of customers escaping the winter cold. Shota worked behind the counter with clumsy hands, often dropping cups or mishearing orders. Yet the customers laughed kindly and his co-workers encouraged him little by little. And then, one quiet afternoon, she appeared, Emily. She walked into the cafe wrapped in a soft beige coat, her smile carrying a gentle glow that lit up the entire room. When she approached the counter, Shota felt his heartbeat stumble. "Hi," she said softly. Her voice was warm, like sunlight after a long winter. Shota tried to respond, but the English phrases tangled in his mind. Hello, he managed, cheeks turning red. Emily laughed, not at him but with the kind of kindness that embraced his effort. From that day forward, Emily began visiting the cafe more often. Sometimes for coffee, sometimes with a book, and sometimes just to chat with Shota. She helped him with simple English words, writing them down on napkins, repeating them patiently until he understood. Her smile became the quiet strength he leaned on as he tried to build a new life in a foreign world. And Shota began to feel something unexpected. A warmth growing in the cold city, a feeling he could not name yet, but one he could not ignore. This was the beginning. The first step toward a bond that would shape the rest of his life. Chapter 2. A connection begins. As winter deepened in New York, Shota found comfort in the small routines of the cafe. But more than anything, he found comfort in seeing Emily. She arrived with a gentle smile every time, sometimes with a scarf wrapped tightly around her neck, sometimes with snowflakes still resting on her hair. Whenever she walked through the door, Shota felt the room grow brighter. Emily would sit at her usual corner table, open a book and look up with a warm, "Hey Shota. How's your English today?" Shota answered shyly, but little by little her presence gave him the courage to speak more. They began sharing small stories about their families, their dreams, and the challenges they faced. Emily told him about her younger sister, a spirited girl who loved photography. Shota spoke of his hometown far across the ocean, and how he missed the smell of the sea. Sometimes, Emily would write phrases on napkins for him. "Don't worry. You're doing great. One step at a time." Shota kept every napkin folded carefully in his notebook, like tiny treasures of encouragement. As days passed, their connection grew naturally, quietly, like a warm candle in the middle of winter. One evening, after closing time, Emily stayed behind to help Shota clean the tables. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, their hands brushing lightly as they reached for the same cup. Shota felt his heart tremble. Emily paused, glancing at him with soft eyes that seemed to understand everything he couldn't say. "Shota," she whispered, "you're stronger than you think." Her words sank deep into his heart, planting a seed he didn't dare name, a hope, or perhaps something even greater. From that night, Shota realized the truth. Emily was becoming more than a friend. More than a kind stranger in a foreign land. She was becoming the warmth his lonely heart had been searching for. And though neither of them said it out loud, a fragile, beautiful feeling had already begun to bloom. Chapter 3. The goodbye. Winter settled over New York like a quiet blanket, soft but heavy, as if the city itself knew something was about to change. Shota had grown comfortable in his small routines. Waking early, stepping into the cold air, and arriving at the cafe where Emily's warm smile always waited for him. Her presence had become something he looked forward to, even more than he ever admitted to himself. But one morning, as soft flakes of snow drifted past the window, everything shifted. His phone buzzed on the table. A message from Japan. Short, urgent, unmistakable. His mother had collapsed. Her condition was critical. He needed to return home immediately. Shota felt the world tilt slightly, as if the ground beneath him had loosened. His fingers trembled as he tried to process the words. He had always known that living far from home meant this day might come, But he never thought it would come now, when his life in America had finally begun to feel less fragile. Emily arrived early for her shift that day. She noticed him right away, the way he sat motionless, staring at his phone, his breath uneven. "Shota?" Her voice was soft, cautious, that he lifted his eyes to her, feeling them sting. "My mother, she's very sick. I have to go back to Japan today." Emily didn't speak at first. Her shoulders lowered slightly, as if something inside her was folding in. She stepped closer, her breath barely a whisper. "I knew your family was far away, but I didn't think this moment would come so soon." Shota wanted to explain. To tell her that the past months had been filled with loneliness, fear, and confusion, and that she had been the one constant light guiding him through every dark corner of his new life. But the words caught in his throat. Emily reached out and placed her hand gently over his. Her touch was warm, steady. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling, "for letting me be a part of your story, even for a little while." Shota felt something inside him break quietly. Not loudly, not painfully, but like a snowflake melting. Soft, inevitable, irreversible. At the airport later that day, he stood before the glass windows, watching the city skyline blur into shades of gray and white. He thought of the cafe, of Emily's laughter, of the pink rose she had kept for so long. "I won't forget," he whispered into the cold air. "I promise." The plane rose slowly into the sky. Shota closed his eyes. The image of Emily, standing in the falling snow, her eyes shimmering with unspoken words, remained with him, steady and clear. A memory he would carry through every mile. Chapter 4. 20 years later. 20 years passed more quickly than Shota ever imagined. Seasons turned, cities changed, and people came and went. But one memory never softened. The memory of a small cafe, a pink rose, and the girl who had once taught him how to say simple words in English. After returning to Japan, Shota had thrown himself into his medical studies. He worked hard, slept little, and kept moving forward. His mother's illness had shaken him deeply, and it reminded him how fragile life could be. He decided that if he could not control fate, at least he would stand beside people in their most fragile moments. The years that followed were filled with white coats, hospital corridors, and long nights. He learned to stay calm in emergencies. He learned how to speak gently to families who were afraid. He learned how to carry the weight of both success and failure. Patients came and went, but every time he held someone's hand he felt a quiet echo of the warmth he had once received from Emily. Sometimes, after a long shift, Shota would sit alone in the hospital cafeteria with a cup of coffee. The bitter taste always pulled him back to that cafe in America. He would close his eyes for a moment and see her smile. He would hear her voice correcting his English slowly, patiently, without ever laughing at him. "Do you still remember me, Emily?" The question stayed in his heart, even when he tried not to think about it. Emily's life had taken a different path. She had married a kind man and moved forward, believing that was what she was supposed to do. At first her life looked steady from the outside. She had a job, a home, and a partner. But over time small cracks formed. Arguments grew heavier. Dreams began to drift apart. She worked hard, often too hard, and told herself that this was adulthood. There were bills to pay, responsibilities to carry, people to support. Her heart became quiet, not broken, but wrapped in layers of fatigue and unspoken feelings. During those years she sometimes passed by the old cafe where she had once worked. When she walked by, she would slow down for a moment, glance through the window, and then keep moving. There was no reason to stop, she told herself. That part of her life was over. But every winter, without understanding why, she felt something shift inside her. Her mind returned to a shy young man with a soft voice, a clumsy accent, and a single pink rose in his hand. She wondered how his life had turned out. If he had become who he wanted to be. If he had ever returned to that cafe and found only empty chairs and strangers where she used to stand. Years later, her marriage quietly ended. There was no loud fight. Just a long, slow distance that finally became too wide to cross. Emily moved into a small apartment of her own. At night, when the city lights reflected in her window, she sometimes whispered to herself, "At least I once knew a love that was simple and honest, even if it did not last." Meanwhile, Shota had become a respected doctor. His colleagues praised his calm decision-making and his gentle way of speaking to patients. He smiled politely, but inside there was a part of him that still felt incomplete. He had helped many people, But he had never been able to say goodbye properly to the person who had changed his heart. One day, an invitation arrived. It was for an international medical conference in the United States. He hesitated as he held the letter in his hands. The event was not in the same state where he had lived before, but it was close enough that old memories began to stir. For several nights he left the letter on his desk and tried to ignore it. But each time he walked past, his eyes were drawn to it again. He knew that this was not just a professional opportunity. It felt like something else. A door he thought had been closed was opening just a little. Finally he made his decision. He would go. When Shota arrived in America again, the air felt both familiar and strange. The sound of English surrounded him faster than he remembered, but his understanding was much stronger now. He checked into his hotel, attended the first sessions of the conference, and listened to lectures on new treatments and future medical technologies. It was important work. It mattered. But somewhere underneath, another rhythm was beating. The rhythm of an old story. Chapter 5. The second rose. For a long moment neither of them moved. The cafe seemed to hold its breath, as if the walls themselves understood the weight of the moment unfolding within them. Emily looked down at the bouquet of pink roses she held, then at the single rose in Shota's hand, a soft, trembling smile forming on her lips. "Shota, it feels like time folded in half," she whispered. "As if the years disappeared the moment I saw you standing here." Shota felt the same. 20 years of memories, regrets, hopes and unanswered questions. All gathered quietly between them like petals drifting softly into place. He stepped closer, careful, gentle, as if approaching something fragile and precious. "I didn't come here expecting anything," he said softly. "Life moved forward for both of us. But when I walked into this cafe, something inside me finally felt home." Emily inhaled shakily. "Do you know how many times I wondered about you?" Her voice trembled, not with weakness but with truth. "In winter especially. Every snowfall brought back your face. How you looked that morning when you told me you had to go home." Shota's chest tightened. "I wanted to say goodbye properly," he said. "But everything happened too fast. And after I returned to Japan, life swept me away. I buried myself in study, in work, in responsibilities I didn't know how to escape." He looked into her eyes, steady and warm. "But even when I tried not to remember you, my heart didn't forget." Emily blinked as if holding back a tear. "You were the first person who made me feel seen," she whispered. "Not judged. Not compared. You listened. You were gentle. You were shy and honest, and you made me believe that small kindnesses still mattered." She looked down at the roses again. "I kept thinking, maybe that's why the pink rose stayed with me." She laughed softly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "It shouldn't have meant so much. It was only one flower. But it did." Shota felt a warmth spread through his chest, a warmth he had lived without for far too long. He placed the single rose gently on top of her bouquet, just as he had imagined doing countless times. "Emily," he said quietly, "I don't want to lose this moment. Not again." Emily looked up, her eyes glistening. "Do you think," she hesitated, searching for words, "do you think it's too late for us?" Shota shook his head with a soft, certain smile. "No," he said simply. "Because the story didn't end. It just paused." A quiet breath left Emily's lips, a release of years she had carried alone. "I want to know you again," she whispered. "Not the Shota I remember, but the man standing in front of me now." "And I want to know you," Shota replied. "The Emily you became. The one who kept walking even when life was heavy." A faint winter light filtered through the cafe window, illuminating the two of them like a scene from a memory, or the beginning of a new chapter. They took a seat together by the window. For a while they simply talked. Not as strangers reunited by fate, but as two people rediscovering the space they once held in each other's lives. Emily spoke of her challenges, her divorce, her work, and the quiet loneliness she never admitted to anyone. Shota shared stories of the hospital, of the patients he had held during their final moments, of the nights when the weight of the world pressed on his heart. They listened, not to respond, but to understand. And with every sentence, the distance of 20 years grew smaller. At one point, Emily laughed softly. "You know, I always imagined you'd come back someday. Maybe not soon, maybe not in the way I wanted, but something in me believed our story wasn't over." Shota smiled. "I think I believed the same, even when I tried not to." When they stepped outside together, the sky had shifted into a deep twilight blue. The street lights glowed softly, casting warm halos onto the pavement. A light snow had begun to fall, tiny flakes drifting quietly around them, like blessings from a winter sky. Emily pulled her coat tighter. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Shota looked at her, his breath soft in the cold air. "Yes," he said. "But it's not the snow I'm looking at." Emily's cheeks warmed, a gentle blush spreading across her face. "You still say things like that?" she teased shyly. He grinned. "Only when they're true." They walked slowly through the familiar streets side by side, their steps falling into a rhythm that felt natural, as if it had never been interrupted. Emily looked up at him. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Of course." Why did you bring a rose again today? After all this time?" Shota paused beneath a streetlight, the glow outlining his face. "Because," he said, "the first rose was a thank you. For the girl who believed in me." He stepped closer. "And the second rose is for the woman you became. For the life you lived. For the fact that, after everything, you're still here." Emily's breath caught again, a soft cloud in the winter air. "Shota." She couldn't find the rest of her words. But she didn't need to. Shota gently took her hand. A gesture neither bold nor hesitant, just right, their fingers intertwined. Warm, familiar, perfectly matched. For the first time in 20 years, they walked forward together. Not into the past, not into fear, but into a quiet, hopeful future that waited patiently for them to return. And above them, snowflakes continued to fall, soft and steady, like blessings whispered from the sky. The second rose finally had found its moment, and so had they. Chapter 6. The Winter Promise. The snow fell a little heavier as they walked, each flake settling gently on their coats, melting into soft traces of white. Emily glanced at Shota's hand still wrapped around hers, as if making sure it was really happening, that he was truly beside her again. "Do you have time tonight?" she asked quietly, almost shyly, as if fearing the answer. Shota nodded without hesitation. "I do. For the first time in a very long while. I do." Emily smiled, relieved in a way she didn't hide. "There's a small place nearby. A quiet wine bar. I go there sometimes after work, when I need to breathe." Shota looked at her gently. "I'd like that. To hear about the parts of your life I never got to see." They walked slowly, the world around them falling into a peaceful hush. Cars passed quietly, people hurried home, but for Shota and Emily time moved differently. Unrushed, unforced, like a long-awaited melody finally playing again. Inside the wine bar, soft jazz played in the background. Warm amber lights illuminated wooden shelves lined with bottles aged by time. The space felt intimate, almost like it had been waiting for them. Emily removed her coat, smoothing her hair. Shota watched her carefully, the way he once did, admiring her without drawing attention to it. They sat in a corner booth. The waiter approached with a kind smile. "2 glasses of the house red," Emily said, and Shota nodded, trusting her choice. As soon as the wine arrived, she lifted her glass slightly. "To unexpected reunions," she said with a laugh. Shota lifted his glass too. "To second chances," he replied, their glasses touched with a soft chime. "Tell me about your life in Japan," Emily said. "I know you became a doctor, but I don't know the man behind that title." Shota took a slow breath. It had been years since someone asked him that with such genuine interest. "I studied endlessly," he began. "There were nights I thought about giving up, but I kept moving forward because, somewhere in my heart, I wanted to be someone you'd be proud of." Emily's heart tightened. "You don't owe me that," she whispered. "I know," Shota said gently. "But the truth doesn't change." He continued, "I spent years in hospitals. I learned to hold hope for people who had lost theirs. I watched life enter the world and I held hands when it left. And somewhere in all of that, I began to understand how precious every moment is." Emily listened without interrupting, her eyes soft, absorbing every word. "Shota," she said, voice trembling slightly, "you always carried more kindness than you believed." He smiled quietly. Now it was Emily's turn. "My marriage," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "It was not unhappy. But we grew in different directions. Slowly, quietly. Until I realized we no longer faced the same future." She traced the rim of her wine glass with her fingertip. "I built my career. I worked hard. I made mistakes. But I survived them all. And through everything I kept thinking about the young Japanese man who gave me a pink rose and said thank you in a voice softer than snow. Shota felt something shift in his heart, a blend of ache and warmth. I never wanted to be a ghost in your memories, he said softly. You weren't, Emily answered immediately. You were a place I kept safely in my heart. Not to hold on to the past but to remind myself that once, someone saw me with pure honesty. Shota lowered his gaze, moved more deeply than he expected. The evening deepened. Wine glasses slowly emptied, yet their conversation only grew fuller. Each story a bridge rebuilding the years they'd lost. At one point, Emily reached across the table, her fingers lightly brushing his. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. If you could go back, would you have wanted things to be different? Shota thought carefully. I would have wanted more time, he said. To tell you how much your kindness mattered. To stay longer on those snowy nights. To hold your hand without fear. Emily swallowed, her eyes shimmering. But, Shota continued, I also know that who we are now exists because of everything we lived through. Vain. The distance. The choices. Maybe. We had to walk our separate paths so that today could mean what it means now. Emily exhaled softly, amazed by the truth in his words. I think, she whispered, that's the most beautiful answer I've ever heard. When they left the wine bar, the night had grown quieter, snow blanketing the city in gentle silver. They walked to the curb, the world around them coated in stillness. Shota, Emily said, stopping beneath a street lamp, are you staying long? A week, he replied. And I'd like to see you again. Not once, but as many times as you'll allow. Emily laughed softly, a warm, surprised sound. I would like that. Very much. Shota stepped closer. Not bold. Not hesitant. Just certain. Then may I see you tomorrow? He asked. Emily nodded, cheeks glowing. Yes, she said quietly. Tomorrow, and the day after that. And maybe, the next day too. Shota felt a warmth spread through him. A warmth he thought he had lost forever. He reached out gently, brushing a few snowflakes from her hair. Emily, he said, this time, I don't want to disappear. She met his eyes, and for the first time in 20 years she didn't hide her heart. Then don't, she whispered. Stay as long as your heart tells you to. Shota smiled, a tender, hopeful smile. Then, Chapter 7. The night the city listened. The next evening, the city seemed to move more slowly, as if aware that two people, reunited after 20 years, needed a quieter backdrop to rediscover each other. Shota arrived at the cafe early. The same cafe where everything had begun. He stood by the window watching the snow melt into soft droplets on the glass. The memories returned, but they no longer carried pain. Only a sense of distance traveled, and distance closed. When Emily walked in, the small bell above the door chimed softly like it was greeting her too. You came early, she said with a hint of surprise. I didn't want to waste a single minute, Shota replied. Emily laughed quietly, a sound he never realized he had missed so deeply. They sat at the same table where he once struggled with English phrases. Where she once taught him gently, one smile at a time. Before we talk about everything, Emily began, there's someone who wants to see you. Shota blinked. Someone. Emily nodded, her younger sister entered from behind her. Older now but unmistakably the bright, lively girl he remembered. Her hair was tied loosely, her eyes warm with recognition. Shota, she said as if 20 years were a mere weekend apart. He stood to greet her, unexpectedly happy. You haven't changed, he said. Oh, trust me, she laughed. I've changed plenty. But seeing you takes me right back to those days. They spoke for a while. About family, about the years that had passed, about the winter night Emily cried after Shota's sudden departure, and how her sister quietly stayed by her side. Shota listened with a tightened heart. He had never known the depth of emotion his leaving had caused. But hearing it now didn't hurt. It simply made him more certain that seeing Emily again was not coincidence, but something closer to fate. That Emily's sister excused herself eventually, leaving the two of them alone with the soft hum of the cafe surrounding them. Outside, the city lights flickered to life. Would you like to walk? Emily asked. They stepped out into the evening air. Snow had stopped falling, but the city wore a delicate shimmer, a reminder of the season they had once shared. They walked without a destination, simply letting their feet lead them. Shota, Emily said, I want to ask you something. Something I couldn't ask back then. He looked at her attentively. What is it? She hesitated, choosing her words with care. If you hadn't received that message from Japan, if life hadn't pulled you away, do you think we might have become something? Shota didn't answer immediately. He looked up at the sky, the faint glow of city lights, the breath of winter gathering in the air. I think, he said slowly, we were becoming something already. Something neither of us had fully named yet. Emily's breath caught, not from sadness but from the honesty in his voice. And now? She asked. Shota stopped walking. Emily turned to face him. Their breaths mingled in the cold air. Now, he said, I want to learn who you are today. Not who you were. Not who I imagined. But the woman standing in front of me now. Emily lowered her gaze, emotions softening her expression. That might take time, she whispered. I'm not in a hurry anymore, he replied. They continued walking until they reached a small park, deserted in winter, quiet enough that even their footsteps felt gentle. They sat on a bench, the cold softened by the warmth settling between them. Do you regret anything? Emily asked suddenly. Shota considered. No, he said. Not regret. There are things I wish could have been different, but regret means I would want to erase the past. And I don't. Because the past brought me here. To this moment. Emily looked at him for a long time, long enough that Shota felt his heart shift again in the way it used to. I'm grateful you said that, she murmured. Because I've spent years wondering if I held on to something that didn't matter. It mattered, Shota said immediately. You mattered. The wind moved gently through the trees as if agreeing with him. Emily leaned back, looking up at the night sky. Do you think, she began, that life gives people more than one chance? Shota nodded. I think life gives chances to those who keep walking. Even when it hurts. Even when they feel lost. Life circles back to the things that were real. Emily closed her eyes as if letting the words settle in her heart. When she opened them again, she said softly, then maybe, this is our second chance. Shota reached for her hand, not urgently, not cautiously, but with the quiet certainty that had been building since the moment he saw her again. Their fingers intertwined naturally, as if they had always been meant to return to this simple connection. The city around them continued to move, but in that small park, beneath the winter branches and the soft hum of distant traffic, time slowed. Shota looked at her, and Emily looked back, two lives separated by decades now gently aligning. Again, Emily, he said, this time, whatever happens, I want to walk it with you. Her lips curved into a soft, trembling smile. Then stay, she whispered. Stay, until the winter ends. Stay, until the roses bloom again. And Shota answered quietly, I will. In that quiet corner of the city, on a winter night that seemed to listen to every heartbeat, a new beginning took shape. Not rushed, not forced, but beautifully inevitable. A promise, formed softly, held gently, and written into the story of their second rose. Chapter 8. The hours between yesterday and tomorrow. After their hands intertwined beneath the winter sky, Shota and Emily left the quiet park and walked slowly back toward the city. Neither of them spoke much. They didn't need to. Some moments grow more meaningful in silence than in any words. The cafe lights behind them faded, and the city's gentle hum wrapped around them like a soft blanket. It was a strange feeling, to walk beside someone who had once been a treasured memory and now, once again, a living presence. Emily broke the silence first. Do you have plans tomorrow? She asked. Shota smiled. Just the conference in the morning. But I'm free after that. She nodded as if relieved. I'd like to talk more tomorrow. There are things I never got to tell you. Shota glanced at her profile, the glow of streetlights catching her eyelashes, the quiet determination in her expression. I want to hear all of it, he said gently. And I want to tell you my side too. They stopped at a small pedestrian crossing. The light turned red, casting a soft glow over them. Emily hesitated before speaking again. There's something I should say tonight, she whispered. Before tomorrow comes. And before we decide anything. Shota waited patiently. I'm not the same girl you knew, she said. I've been through things. Made mistakes. Lost things. And there were years I wasn't proud of myself. Shota shook his head softly. You don't owe me a perfect past, Emily. No one does. What matters is who you are now. Emily closed her eyes for a moment as if letting those words settle in the deepest part of her heart. You always had a way of smoothing out my fears, she said. But I guess I'm afraid of wanting too much. Afraid that if I reach out again the world will take it away, like last time. Shota felt the weight of her words. He remembered the day he left, the pain in her eyes, the incomplete future they never had a chance to shape. The light turned green. They began walking again. A few blocks later they reached the hotel where Shota was staying. The lobby lights glowed warmly and for a moment, neither of them moved toward the entrance. Thank you for tonight, Emily said softly. It feels strange, but good. It feels like something we left unfinished, Shota replied. And now we finally have time to look at it again. Emily's lips curled into a small, almost shy smile. When I walked into that cafe today, I didn't expect my heart to remember you so quickly. And mine never really forgot, Shota said. Emily looked down and when she looked back up her eyes shimmered with a mix of hope and uncertainty. Shota, she said, please don't disappear tomorrow. He stepped closer, not touching her but standing near enough that she could feel his warmth in the winter air. I won't, he promised. Not this time. A moment of quiet stretched between them. Emily glanced at the hotel entrance and laughed softly. You should rest. You look like you've been carrying a long story on your shoulders. And you? Shota asked. I'll walk a little, she said, looking toward the softly lit street. I need to think. Not in a bad way, just to make space for all of this. Shota nodded. Will you text me when you get home? I will, she said. And tomorrow? He asked. Emily met his eyes with a steadiness that felt like a new beginning. Tomorrow, she said, I'll meet you at the cafe. Same time as yesterday. Let's talk about the years we missed. Shota felt warmth spread through his chest. I'll be there. She took a few steps back, her hands tucked into her coat pockets, snowflakes drifting gently around her. Good night, Shota. Good night, Emily. She turned and walked down the street, her figure growing smaller against the glow of the city lights. Shota watched until she disappeared around a corner. Then he entered the hotel lobby, his heart unusually light. As if a door that had been closed for 20 years had quietly opened again. In his room, he took off his coat, sat at the small desk and whispered to himself. This time, I won't let fate choose everything for us. Outside, the night moved on, between yesterday and tomorrow, carrying with it the quiet promise of a second chance still unfolding. Chapter 9. What was left unsaid. The morning after their reunion, Shota woke earlier than usual. Though he tried to calm his racing thoughts, sleep had offered little rest. 20 years had passed, yet the feeling from last night's meeting still lingered in his chest. A quiet warmth he had not felt in decades. He walked toward the familiar cafe, the same one where everything had begun. The winter air was crisp, and the city moved with its usual rhythm, but for Shota time felt strangely still. When he stepped inside, Emily was already there. She sat at a corner table, hands wrapped around a warm cup, gazing out the window as if trying to gather her thoughts. The morning light touched her gently, and in that moment, Shota saw both the young woman he once knew and the life she had lived since. Good morning, Shota, she said softly as he approached. Good morning, he replied, taking the seat across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, just a space shared by two people searching for the right words. Finally, Emily exhaled. Last night felt unreal. I wasn't sure I'd ever see you again. Shota nodded. I didn't expect it either. But seeing you brought back everything I had tucked away. Maybe too much. Emily looked down at her cup. I used to wonder, she whispered, if I was just a small chapter in your life, or if you left because of something I did. Shota's expression tightened. No, he said immediately. It was never because of you. He paused, gathering courage. When my mother fell ill, I didn't have the strength to explain, or the courage to face how much you meant to me. I was young, afraid, and overwhelmed. Emily finally met his eyes. I waited, for a while. I'm sorry, he said, voice barely audible. I know, she replied with a gentle sadness. I'm not angry. Life just took us down different paths. She took a slow breath. There were nights I wished you had said something, anything, before you left, but maybe we weren't ready then. Shota listened, each word settling deep within him. There was no blame in her voice, only truth. I thought about you often, he said quietly. Not as a regret, but as a reminder of who I wanted to become. Emily's expression softened. You did become that person, didn't you? A doctor. Someone who helps others. I always believed you would do something meaningful. Shota felt a small warmth in his chest. And you, he said, you built a life too. Emily smiled faintly. Not always a happy one. But I learned. I grew. And even on the hardest days, the memory of that rose you gave me, it reminded me that kindness stays even when people drift apart. Shota lowered his gaze. The truth is, I kept the memory of you close because it was one of the few things that made me feel less alone. Emily's eyes shimmered. Shota, she whispered, do you think this second chance means something? He hesitated, not wanting to cling to hope too quickly. I don't know, he said honestly, but seeing you again made me realize. There were words I wanted to say back then. Words I didn't have the courage to speak. Emily leaned slightly forward. And now? Shota inhaled slowly, then met her eyes. Now? I want to be honest. About what I felt. About what I still feel, even if time has changed us. Emily didn't respond immediately. She simply let the words settle, as if allowing her heart to catch up. Outside, a light snowfall began. Tiny white flakes drifted past the window, softening the city around them. Emily looked toward the falling snow and whispered, maybe we're not here by accident. Shota followed her gaze. Maybe, he echoed, and in that quiet morning, surrounded by memories and snowfall, they both understood. There were chapters left unwritten, and perhaps this time they would write them together. Chapter 10, The Thread of Fate. That evening, Shota walked alone through the quiet streets of the city. The snowfall from earlier had settled into a thin layer of white, softening the world around him. Yet inside his heart, everything felt clearer than it had in years. Emily had agreed to meet again the next day. Her voice when she said, tomorrow, carried a trembling hope, as if she too sensed that something important was unfolding. Shota stopped at a small park bench, the same one he often sat on. During his early years in America. Back then he would watch people hurry by, wondering if he would ever belong, ever feel understood, ever meet someone whose presence brought warmth to the cold. He smiled faintly. He had met her. He had met Emily. And somehow, after 20 years, their paths had crossed again. The next morning, Shota arrived at the cafe early. He chose a seat near the window, watching the city wake under the pale morning sun. Minutes later, Emily walked in. She wore a simple cream-colored coat. Her hair was slightly tousled from the wind, but what caught Shota's attention was the look in her eyes. A mixture of nervousness, hope, and something he couldn't name. Good morning, she said softly. Good morning, he replied, standing up. When she sat down, Emily placed her hands gently around her cup. I've been thinking, she began, her voice quiet but steady, about us. About what yesterday meant. Shota listened. Emily continued. I realized something. When I saw you again. The person I used to be, the girl who waited for you, she came back for a moment. But I'm not that girl anymore. Shota looked down, bracing himself. And yet, Emily added, I don't want to pretend that seeing you didn't affect me. It did. Maybe more than I expected. A slow breath escaped Shota's lips. Emily, I don't want to recreate the past. I just want to know you again. The present you. Emily looked surprised and touched. That might be exactly what I needed to hear. They left the cafe and walked through the city, side by side, not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth between them. The snow had turned into a gentle drizzle, dotting the pavement with shimmering droplets. Do you ever think about destiny? Emily asked suddenly. Shota tilted his head. I do, he said. I think some people leave a mark so deep that even time can't erase it. Emily smiled faintly. And were those people for each other? I think, Shota said softly, some threads never break. Emily stopped walking. She turned to him, searching his expression with quiet intensity. Then, what? Chapter 11. The Promise of Tomorrow. Under the soft glow of the cafe lights, Shota and Emily sat across from each other. 20 years had passed since the last time they shared a moment like this, yet the silence between them felt gentle, not empty. There was no need to rush. Just being there, breathing the same air again, felt like a small miracle. Shota, Emily finally whispered, her voice calm but trembling slightly. When I talk to you, I feel like I can find myself again. Shota inhaled deeply, releasing the words he had carried for so many years. I feel the same. When I'm with you, the part of me that tried so hard back then, the part that refused to give up, it comes back. Emily smiled softly and looked out the window. Footsteps on the pavement, the aroma of warm coffee and a faint jazz melody filled the room. The world had changed, yet somehow this place felt untouched. Do you remember? Emily took a small box from her bag. Inside was a single dried pink petal. The rose? Shota asked, his voice unsteady. Yes, she nodded. I could never throw it away. It meant something to me. It stayed alive in my heart. Shota gently touched her hand, choosing his words carefully. Emily, we took different paths and we lost each other for a long time. But we met again. I don't think that's a coincidence. A light flickered in Emily's eyes, as if a door she had closed long ago quietly opened. Shota, do you think we could start again? Shota smiled, reached into his coat and took out a paper sleeve containing a single pink rose. Of course. This isn't the second rose. This is a rose. For our tomorrow. Emily held the rose to her chest and closed her eyes. After years of wandering, she finally felt herself returning home. Hand in hand they stepped outside. The winter air was cold, yet the space around them felt warm. Shota, what will you do now? Emily asked gently. He laughed a little, shy but sincere. First, I want to take you to breakfast tomorrow. Emily laughed too, a sound so familiar it felt as if no time had passed at all. I'd like that. Tomorrow, and beyond. They walked together, speaking softly about small dreams, simple plans, and the future they never got to share. And they both understood. There is no such thing as a meeting that comes too late. Love always leaves room for a new chapter. As the cafe lights faded behind them, a single star appeared in the night sky, quiet, hopeful, as if blessing the beginning of their new story. End of chapter 11. Chapter 12. The road ahead. The next morning, sunlight poured gently over the quiet streets. Shota arrived a little early, standing in front of the cafe that had shaped so many pieces of his life. His past, his sorrow, and now his hope. When Emily appeared at the corner wrapped in a soft beige coat, it felt as if the world paused for just a brief moment. Her steps were slow but sure, like someone who had finally found a path worth walking again. Good morning, Shota, she said with a small smile. Good morning, he replied, feeling a warmth spread through him. They shared breakfast together. Simple, unhurried, filled with quiet laughter that had been waiting 20 years to return. Afterward they walked through the park where winter trees reached toward a clear sky. Fallen leaves crunched softly beneath their feet. Emily, Shota said gently, I spent years believing that yesterday defined everything. But being here with you, I realize tomorrow is something we can choose together. Emily stopped and looked at him. There was no rush in her eyes, only sincerity. I'm scared, Shota, she admitted softly. So much time has passed. We've lived whole lives apart. I know, he said. But hearts don't measure time. They remember warmth, and they recognize home. Emily lowered her gaze for a moment, breathing in the cold air. Then she stepped closer, taking his hand. Then, let's choose gently, she whispered. One day at a time. They continued walking hand in hand. The city moved around them. Cars, conversations, the hum of life. But their pace stayed calm, steady, like the beginning of a new melody. Later that afternoon, they visited a small flower shop tucked between tall brick buildings. Bouquets filled the room with soft scents. Emily pointed to the pink roses. These, she said, always remind me of the person who believed in me before I believed in myself. Shota smiled, choosing one perfect rose. He turned to her. Then let me believe in us, for the both of us. Emily took the rose, holding it delicately. When I look at you, she said, I feel like the person I wanted to be at 20 is still inside me. Still alive. Then let's bring her back, Shota replied. And the version of me who once gave you a rose, hoping you'd smile the way you're smiling now. The evening settled gently over the city as they walked outside. A soft breeze brushed against them, carrying the scent of winter and the promise of spring. "Shota," Emily said quietly, "if we write the next chapter together, what do you think it will be like?" He looked up at the darkening sky where the first star of the night appeared. "I don't know yet," he answered with a peaceful smile. "But for the first time in a very long time, I want to find out." Emily leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then let's find out," she whispered. Under the pale glow of street lamps, two figures walked side by side, not rushing, not looking back, but moving forward with the gentle courage that comes from hearts reunited. This was no longer a story about what was lost. It was a story about what could still be found. A story that would continue beyond this night, shaped by two people who finally chose each other again. Chapter 13, Epilogue. Where roses bloom again. Time has a quiet way of softening the edges of our memories. But for Shota and Emily, the return of their story did not feel like a memory. It felt like a new beginning. In the months that followed their reunion, they discovered a rhythm that was gentle, unforced, and entirely their own. They met for weekend walks, slow dinners, and long talks about the years they had lived apart and the dreams they still held. Shota often found himself watching Emily when she wasn't looking, the way light settled softly around her, the way her smile carried both strength and tenderness. It reminded him that love does not disappear. It simply waits in the quiet corners of the heart. One spring afternoon, they visited the flower shop again. Pink roses filled the shelves, their soft petals glowing like small sunsets. Emily lifted one to her face, letting its scent settle around her. "I used to wonder," she said softly, "if there was a moment in my life I was meant to return to. Something unfinished, waiting for me." Shota stepped closer. "Maybe it wasn't a moment," he said. "Maybe it was a person." Emily's eyes glistened. "You think so?" "I know so," he replied gently. "Because I've felt it too." They walked outside where spring breezes drifted through budding trees. People passed by, each carrying their own stories, some ending, some beginning. And Shota realized that his and Emily's story was no longer one of distance or mischances. It was a story of return. A story of resilience. A story of the quiet, steady courage it takes to reach for someone again. As the sun dipped low, Emily placed the pink rose carefully into her bag. "Shota," she said, "do you ever think about what comes next?" He looked at her, not as the woman he once lost, but as the woman he had found again. "Yes," he said simply. "And I think whatever comes next, we don't have to face it alone anymore." Emily took his hand. Her grip was warm, steady, certain, and with that simple gesture the road ahead, uncertain, unwritten, endless, became a place of hope. Together they began to walk. Not quickly, not fearfully, but with hearts open to the possibility that love, once lost, can bloom again. And somewhere, deep inside that quiet spring evening, the second rose, the one that had waited 20 years to be given, finally took root. The Second Rose is a timeless love story about reunion, destiny, and the courage to begin again. 20 years after a brief but unforgettable romance in New York, Shota and Emily meet once more. No longer the young dreamers they once were, but two adults shaped by loss, distance, and quiet hope. Through gentle conversations, shared memories, and the symbolic gift of a single rose, they rediscover a connection that never truly faded. This audio edition invites listeners into a cinematic world filled with emotion, longing, and the beauty of second chances. A story for anyone who believes that love can return even after decades. A tender, cinematic love story of two hearts reunited after 20 years, told through quiet hope, memory, and a single rose. Hiro Creator is a Japanese novelist and digital artist whose work blends emotional storytelling with a gentle, cinematic style. After living in New York for several years, Hiro was deeply inspired by the kindness, culture, and personal connections he experienced there. His creative work spans novels, audio stories, and visual art, all centered around themes of love, resilience, and the beauty of human connection. Listeners will experience a heartfelt story of reunion and destiny, cinematic pacing suited for audio immersion, deep emotional resonance between two unforgettable characters, a gentle narrative voice perfect for relaxed, atmospheric listening. A rare cross-cultural romance rooted in real-life emotion, a gentle, cinematic narrative that translates beautifully to audio universal themes. Longing, reunion, and second chances is strong emotional pacing, ideal for audiobook storytelling. Chapter 12, Epilogue. The Quiet Promise. Time has a way of reshaping memories, softening the painful ones and sharpening the ones that continue to guide us. For Shota and Emily, the 20 years they spent apart were not empty. They were years filled with choices, losses, victories, and quiet moments of growth. Yet beneath all of it, both carried a small, unspoken hope that life might give them one more chance to finish the story they once began. After reconnecting at the cafe, they spent long evenings talking, sharing everything they had never said before. Not as the young man and woman they once were, but as two people who had lived, endured, and kept a gentle flame alive inside their hearts. Emily spoke of her struggles, the loneliness after divorce, and the dreams she had put aside for the sake of responsibility. Shota shared the weight of caring for patients, the nights he questioned his choices, and the lingering ache of a goodbye he never wanted to say. Yet as they spoke, they realized something simple. Their hearts had never actually drifted apart. One day, as the winter sun filtered through a quiet park, Emily paused beneath a bare tree and said softly, "Do you think we were meant to find each other again?" Shota looked at her, his voice steady, filled with a certainty that had taken years to form. "Fate isn't a straight line," he said. "It bends, it waits, and sometimes it brings two people back exactly when they're ready." Emily smiled. A smile touched by gratitude, warmth, and something beautifully fragile. They walked on side by side, their steps no longer hurried, no longer shaped by fear or uncertainty. For the first time, they were simply moving toward a shared tomorrow. As the day faded into evening, Shota placed a hand in his coat pocket. Inside was a rose. A soft pink rose, just like the one he had given her years ago, but he didn't hand it to her yet. Not because he hesitated, but because he wanted the moment to come naturally. The moment when both of them would know that this second chance was not a coincidence, but a promise life had quietly guarded for them. And so their story continued. Not with dramatic declarations, not with rushed decisions, but with small steps, gentle hope, and a love that had survived time itself. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories are the ones that return to us after we thought they were gone. This is not an ending. It is the beginning of the life that waited for them. A life carried by the quiet strength of the second rose.